Living off the land and growing your own food sounds really dreamy and wonderful, and it is in a lot of ways. But what do those crops look like once spring hits? 6, 7, even 8 months after being harvested. And what are we eating at this point in the year to use up all of that homegrown goodness that we harvested back in September and October? Can you blow out the candles?
Whoa!
You got it. You do it so good. Should we all do it together?
2, 3.
It's Monday morning and we are just coming off of celebrating our daughter's 2nd birthday yesterday. It's been some full and fun days and I did very little in the way of food prep this weekend. I'm gonna start the day by getting a roast slow cooking in our Dutch oven. To do this, I just chop and saute some garlic and then sear the beef arm roast for a minute or 2 on each side. A chuck roast would be great here too. Then I add some salt and some chili powder and stick it in our slow cooking oven for the day to have this roast with dinner. A slow cooker would be another great way to do this. Now that spring is here, our chickens are back up to laying in full force. For the first time in many months, they are back to producing more eggs than our family can typically eat in a day. So while I'm getting the roast going, our daughter is getting going on making a Dutch baby pancake for breakfast. Actually 2 of them because 1 isn't enough for us. But honestly, this is a meal that we'll commonly eat not just for breakfast, but for lunch or dinner as well. We still have a good number of frozen berries in the freezer, especially strawberries and rhubarb, and with strawberry and rhubarb season right around the corner, I'm needing to be a bit more intentional about incorporating these things into our meals so we can make sure that we use them up. So I'm gonna make a strawberry rhubarb sauce to go with the Dutch baby pancakes. Instead of canning our berries into jams or jellies, I prefer to preserve berries by freezing them. Yes, it does take up more room in our freezer, but we aren't huge jelly or jam eaters, and I love the flexibility that I have that I can do so many more things with berries if I freeze them. They can be used in crisps or cobblers or baking. They can be turned into a quick stovetop jam or sauce like I'm doing here, or they can be added to smoothies or baked oatmeal. Dutch baby or poof pancakes, as they are often called in our house, is a favorite because they are so easy and so good and a great way to use up eggs if you have lots of them around. We followed a pretty strict gluten-free diet several years ago when we were sorting through some health challenges, and while we aren't gluten-free anymore, there are several recipes that we made in that season that have become favorites in our house, and this Dutch baby pancake is one of them. So instead of wheat flour, we mix up the eggs and a cup of milk with a combination of tapioca starch and coconut flour, and then some salt. The key to getting the maximum poof in your poof pancakes are 1, to whisk it thoroughly. Incorporating more air will give it a better poof. And then the other thing is that you want to make sure you pour the batter into a sizzling hot pan with plenty of fat. The poof is caused by steam created, so in order to get the steam, you need to make sure that the pan and the oven are plenty hot. Once the Dutch baby is cooking, I'm gonna make up the strawberry rhubarb sauce. So to do this, just plop the frozen strawberries and rhubarb directly into a saucepan and sprinkle a tablespoon or 2 of tapioca starch over the fruit as a thickener. Then I just heat it on low to medium heat until it thaws and begins to form a thickened berry sauce.
Very, very good.
Before serving, I like to drizzle just a little honey or maple syrup in at the end to make it just a little bit sweeter.
Okay, it's time to make some whipped cream.
Then the best part is that we like to top our Dutch baby pancakes with some homemade whipped cream. So I had a short stint working at Starbucks before we had kids, and I'm not even a coffee drinker, but my big takeaway from my time working there was that I needed to invest in a whipped cream dispenser. We've had this one for over a decade now, and it's well loved, and my favorite part is that there aren't any junky ingredients like in most of the aerosol whipped cream sprayers that you buy from the store. All we put in here is fresh cream and then a little drizzle of maple syrup or honey. You do need to get those little nitrous oxide chargers to make the whipped cream dispenser do its thing.
Yeah!
There you go, buddy.
That's fun. Do you like that?
Yeah.
That's good.
Good
It's
stuff.
delicious. This is the best meal in the whole entire world. Yes, it is.
Alright, who wants some?
We talk about our real food journey often, and that's not just Joelle. I've seen huge health benefits over the years too, and definitely see the value in getting in as much nutrition as I can throughout the day. I've loved the idea of a multivitamin for years, but little known fact about me, I don't do pills, which eliminates many of the daily supplement options out there. Then I tried Grüns gummies. Grüns are a convenient, comprehensive formula packed into 8 gummies a day. They're made with 60 nutrient-dense ingredients. That's right, actual ingredients. You better bet that Joelle read the label, and they only include fruits and plants that we've heard of before, like organic kale, spinach, broccoli, apples, and blueberries. I've been having my daily pack of Grüns alongside my eggs for breakfast, and I've actually been really surprised how much I enjoy eating them. They're delicious. And such an easy way to get in so many nutrients. And there's a kids option for Grüns too that our kids will happily eat as dessert. Yes, we eat really nutrient-dense meals, but there's not always a ton of diversity in our diet, especially in the winter. So I love that I'm getting not just a multivitamin, but a prebiotic and a real food source of so many plants that we don't have access to on our farmstead. If you're looking for a daily supplement option made with nutrient-dense whole food ingredients, give Grüns a try. Just use our link below and you could get up to 52% off.
Are you always going to have that every day?
At the beginning of the week, I like to do some shopping in our basement grocery store to bring up what we'll need for at least the next few days. We typically grow 4 different kinds of potatoes each year. Adirondack Blues, which are a purple potato, red potatoes, Corollas, which are a yellow potato, and our favorite, and then Elbas, which are a white potato. And we already set aside all of the potatoes that we'll need for seed from all 4 varieties, and we've eaten through all the purple, yellow, and red potatoes already. And this was intentional because the white variety of potatoes that we grow, the Elbas, are our best storage potato. Now that we're 6 months past harvest, we've just started into our crates of Elbas, which are still really firm at this point. One thing that we found helps to keep them firmer longer is to knock off the sprouts that start forming. It's been a month or so since I've done this, so some of them are definitely starting to get long. So we're gonna go in and knock off the sprouts again, and hopefully these will stay firm and last us well for another 2 to 3 months. From our understanding, knocking off the sprouts discourages the potato from wanting to sprout or go to seed, which is what causes them to get soft. But if they aren't sprouting, then they keep more of their energy and stay firmer. Another thing that I need to grab is garlic, which we still have tons of, and it's storing really well, and some sweet potatoes. We've had a few sweet potatoes starting to get soft and go bad or have bad spots on them, but for the most part, we've been really happy with how well they've stored in our basement. This was the first year that we grew a large quantity of sweet potatoes, and we will definitely keep doing it. It's been nice to have the variety, and everyone in our family loves sweet potatoes. The 2 storage crops that we've completely finished at this point are our carrots and onions. Our onion crop did not do well last year at all, so this is one that we're definitely planning to expand significantly this year. So far, the onion seed that we started a month or so ago is looking great. It actually all germinated in spite of us using older seed than we intended to, so we really need to get in and thin those onions. And the grow lights that we got this year have been such a helpful addition. We just finished the last of our carrots a couple weeks ago, so this is another one that we're planning to grow more of this next year. Butternut squash is another thing that we still have tons of. And yes, there have been a few here and there that have gone bad, and when this happens, I just give them to our chickens as a treat. I could can or freeze the puree, but I just haven't gotten to it. Since the majority of our squash are still storing fine, I'm just gonna let them ride and keep them as is for now. In the past, we've had butternut squash store for a full year until the following year's harvest, so my hope is that that will be the case again this year. I'm also going to grab a jar of tomato sauce while I'm down here, as well as some dried nettles. Nettle season is another one that's coming up quick. Usually early May is when our nettles are coming in full force, so I want to finish all of the dried nettles that we have by then to be ready to start preserving for 2026. Stinging nettles are my favorite green to preserve because they're so mild, very similar to a spinach, but they are so rich in nutrients. The sting really doesn't bother me, and I've actually heard it's quite good for you to get stung by stinging nettles if you can tolerate it. The one thing that I did remember to do this weekend was to soak and cook some black beans, so we already have those ready to use in meals this week. Black beans are another one that we still have several quarts left from what we harvested last fall. Hi. We are definitely a soup year-round sort of family, but as the seasons change, I'm just not craving it as much as I do in the fall and winter months. Instead, I've been trying to find some other creative ways to use up the food that we've grown in ways that everyone in our family will enjoy. For lunch, we're gonna have a butternut squash lasagna. This recipe doesn't use any pasta noodles. Instead, it uses thinly sliced butternut squash in place of the noodles, and it works great. If you have a food processor or a mandolin slicer, those would work well to cut the squash into uniform slices, but we don't have either, so I'm just gonna use a sharp knife and do my best to cut them in slices that are around 1/8 of an inch thick. After getting the butternut squash cut, I prepare the filling by sauteing some garlic, browning ground beef, and then adding tomato sauce and some Italian seasoning and salt. I like to do a mixture of mozzarella and shredded cheddar cheese in this recipe, so I'm also going to get those ready. Then it's just assembling the lasagna. So first you spread a thin layer of sauce at the bottom, then put a layer of butternut squash over the top of that. Ideally, the squash would cover the whole pan, but not be overlapping. Then ladle 1/3 of the sauce mixture, followed by a layer of cheese, and then you repeat that 2 more times. So squash, sauce, cheese, cheese. And it's the liquid from the sauce layer covering the butternut squash that helps to fully cook that butternut squash and make sure it's nice and soft.
Look at all this.
I bake this for about an hour, keeping it covered for the first 30 to 40 minutes, and then removing the cover to let the cheese get all melted and bubbly. I always try to avoid using aluminum foil, especially with cooking, so instead I just cover the pans with a stainless steel baking pan and it works great. It's really hard for me to believe that it's already spring, which means this week we'll be picking up the 30 Easter egger chicks that we ordered to add to our laying flock. When we first moved onto our homestead, Jim built this chick brooder out of a shipping crate that he found on Facebook Marketplace, and it's worked great. We need to take some time this afternoon to get the brooder prepped and ready for baby chicks. This just means cleaning it out, laying down some bedding. We use either wood shavings or straw, and then cleaning out feeders and waterers and making sure that our heat lamps are ready. When those baby chicks come, we want to make sure everything is set up to get them warm and dry and well set up with food and water because they are so fragile, especially those first few days and hours. I also need to get another gallon of kombucha fermenting. This was one of my very first crunchy things that we started to make long before we started growing our own food. And I used to try to be much fancier with our kombucha, adding fruit or lemon juice to try different flavors, but now I just make it very plain, just using organic sugar in either a black or green tea. To make it, I heat up a half gallon of water, and then once that's boiling, I drop in 4 to 5 tea bags. After it steeps for 5-ish minutes, I remove the tea bags and pour in a cup of sugar. I'm using Sucanat here instead of a white sugar because we like to buy that in 50-pound bags from Azure Standard. Then I pull out the kombucha that I had fermenting for the past 10-ish days to bottle it. Kombucha is fermented by a SCOBY, which stands for Symbiotic Culture of Bacteria and Yeast. With every batch, the SCOBY forms a new SCOBY, or this pancake-like disc. I generally just let them stack up with multiple batches until it gets unruly, and then I'll compost the extras, or if a friend ever wants one, I always have plenty to give away to people looking to start their own kombucha. I remove the SCOBY and then pour the fermented kombucha into mason jars and close the lids. Then I let the fermented kombucha go through a second ferment. This just means having it sit on the counter here for an extra 10-ish days while the new batch is fermenting. And then I put the batch that has been on the counter in its second ferment in the fridge, and this is what we'll start drinking. After I get all that bottled, I add another half gallon of water to the sweetened tea. The reason I add a half gallon separately instead of heating it all initially is because you don't want to add the SCOBY to hot tea. You need it to be cooled down to room temperature. So adding the room temperature water or even cold water after the first half gallon has been heated just cools it down and speeds up that process. Once that sweetened tea isn't too hot, I'll add it to the jar with some of that remaining kind of sludgy kombucha at the bottom and the SCOBY. You want to leave a little bit of kombucha remaining with each batch as kind of a starter along with the SCOBY to help the fermentation process. Often when it goes through the second ferment, another little baby SCOBY will develop in the jar, so when I'm pouring the kombucha to drink, I always strain it. Jim and I really enjoy kombucha and typically just have one small glass with either lunch or dinner most days. We don't go too crazy with how much we drink. We let the kids have sips here and there and sometimes a small glass, but that's it at this point. And I get asked often about this too, but I always have continued to have one small glass most days during pregnancy as well. That's certainly up to the discretion of each person and doing whatever you feel comfortable with. The first couple of years after we started growing the bulk of our own food, one of my main concerns was, aren't we gonna get sick of eating these same foods like potatoes and butternut squash? But as we've done this, I've been pleasantly surprised by how versatile these crops are and the new ways that we're continuously finding to use them, in addition to the staples like eating them roasted, baked, mashed, or in soups. Things like making gnocchi out of either squash or sweet potatoes, or lately one of our favorite potato recipes is to make potato nachos. Instead of using tortilla chips, you use thinly sliced and roasted potatoes as the base for the nachos. I've also heard of this as Irish nachos. You could also use sweet potatoes instead. Similarly to how I cut the squash for the lasagna, I do the same thing with these potatoes. Slice them into thin slices and then cook them in a single layer until they're soft. I like to do that at around 400 degrees Fahrenheit for around 20 to 25 minutes. Then you can use whatever nacho toppings you want. meat, beans, cheese, tomatoes, sour cream, avocado. When we get a whole cow processed, we get quite a few roasts with that. Now, I love pot roast and would happily use a lot of our roasts for things like that, but our kids get less excited about pot roast, so I like to find other ways to use those roasts that I know everyone will enjoy. In our family, cooking the roasts and then shredding the meat to use in tacos, taco bowls, or nachos is always a hit. Once the potatoes are all cooked, I layer them at the bottom of one pan and then top them with some shredded beef. You could also substitute ground beef, bacon, or other meats here as well. Then black beans that I soaked and cooked this weekend, and then cover it all in some shredded mozzarella and cheddar cheeses. I pop the pan back in the oven and cook it for another 10 to 15 minutes until all of the cheese is melted. And then we like to serve this with sour cream and avocado on top if we have it. As spring approaches, you better believe that we are so excited to taste our first garden fresh strawberry. But in the meantime, we'll keep figuring out ways to eat and enjoy all of the food that we are so grateful to have stored away on shelves and in freezers to keep our family nourished all the way through these spring months.